Okay, guys, this is going to be my review of the film The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And, I really like this film. I think probably more than most, actually, because I think it's not better than Fight Club, but I honestly think it's better than The Social Network. But, what I love about it is this idea of the concept's great, number one, of kind of seeing someone age backwards. But what I love is you see so many films of like going through someone's life and kind of going through different stages of their life. But no film captures this essence of nothing lasts more than this film. Because throughout this whole film, you see him at the beginning, just like you see him just wanting to get wanting to get younger, wanting to get younger, wanting to get younger throughout the beginning. You see that slowly happen. You realize, well, he's no longer old. He's no longer middle age. He's no longer, you know what I mean. And then you get to that moment, and when it really struck me was when Daisy and Benjamin started dating, and they were like the same age, and that's when it started to strike me. And they've had this conversation in the film that Benjamin's gonna get younger and she's gonna get older. This isn't gonna last because with normal couples, you're like, okay, around the same age. When you get older, I get older. When we're young, when I'm young, you were young. But that's not what happens in this relationship. I think that you really explore that when when they're gonna have kids and he can't be the father, and that's hard. And I just think it's the idea of this film really captures the essence of nothing lasting forever, because you're at that moment where you're like, he's at that moment he wants to be, where he's at that same age as Daisy, and they have that meeting in the middle scene. And what that kind of realized is like this idea of living in the moment, that they had to live in the moment, because if they didn't, they don't have a year, they don't have 3 years, they don't have decades to spend together, because eventually he'll be young. And I think it's interesting because Benjamin is an interesting, his kind of case is very unique, because as a child, normally you never want to get older. When you're a kid, when you're 5, when you're 6, when you're 7, you're never like, yay, I want to get older. I want to get old. You're not like that. But with Benjamin, it's a different case. When he was 6, he's as if he's 86. And in that case, he wants to get older. In this case, he wants to grow up. And this idea of, okay, he grows up to become 40 something and similar age as Daisy, but then you realize it's all downhill, and seeing them grow younger and younger. And that's when I start to really make me sad, because you realize this whole film has always had this positive spin on it, because he's getting younger, he's getting to where he wants to be. But it's that final act that is really depressing, that is very sad, because it starts out, the third act, because this film is 3 hours long, so like the third act is a whole hour long-ish. I contend the third act is from when Daisy and Benjamin started dating to the end. And what kind of becomes wrecking of a person, wrecking me, is when you start to realize that they go through this whole montage sequence, but you realize she's getting older and he's getting younger, and and you knew what that notifies. You know what that really means. Because at the beginning of the film, it's all great. He's getting younger, she's getting older. It's all great. She's a kid, and he'll become the same age as her. Everything's great. But then once you get to that crescendo, once you get to that peak, when you're the same age, it's all downhill. And that's when it started to become very sad and very depressing, because you realize they're having so much fun, but again, it captures the essence of this is not gonna last. And I think the most evidence of that is when they have kids, and he realizes, you ain't gonna, I'm gonna be the same age as her, and then I'm gonna be younger, and then I'm gonna die, and then you see Daisy getting older, and like I said, you see him getting younger, and you see and it's just, and the effects of this film are great, and I think again, like I said, the strongest parts are that were Daisy and Benjamin relationship, because they grow together, they change together, but what makes it the strongest is that it's the biggest relationship of showing how of what Benjamin's going through and how that affects someone else. You know what I mean? And how their relationship compares and contrasts as far as age and time goes. And I think it just, I think, is an interesting concept with executed perfectly. You know what I mean? And like I said, the visual effects are great. The performances all around were fantastic. I mean, it's crazy. Do I think Brad Pitt should have won an Oscar for this? Yeah, maybe. But to that point, I'm like, well, how much was, for the first act? But the problem with giving, I think the interesting thing about Brad Pitt in this film is it's like half voiceover, half facial expressions, half him, and like, you know what I mean? So it's like, how much in the first act is truly him, because it's like, I remember they basically digitalized his face on a older person or a younger person's body or whatever. So I mean, that's interesting, but yeah, I think in just all around so great of this. But yeah, like I said, it just, I can't emphasize enough. It really captures better than any other film living in the moment, because I don't think any other film emphasizes it. Because in real life, when you become 80 and when you become 70 and 90, you're not like, I want to get younger. You sort of are, but you're mainly tough luck. Tough luck. You're 80 now. You lived your whole life. But that's not the case with Benjamin. With Benjamin, he had a chance, and he was so excited to kind of be like everybody else, and be that an age that is not 80, that is not 90, and I think that's and another interesting thing is establishing an 80-year-old in a 6-year-old's body. It's just so unique, and again, because of this extremely unique concept, it can really offer the best lessons and the best messages about nothing lasting, that everything must go, and that everybody will die, and you see, like I said, and I think that great contrast between the first act and that third act, because the middle is kind of the weakest of the three acts, because the middle, it honestly feels like a bridge between the first two gaps, you know what I mean, where like the first, besides the stuff with Dave, like everything, the core of this film is that Daisy and Benjamin relationship, but that's what the film is. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button is really the most effective part of that, of displaying how he's aging backwards, is this idea that he's fallen in love with someone, but they can't love each other for that long because he'll be younger and she'll get older, and I think and that's really the strongest parts. And so when he visits her in New York, and by the way, when she gets hit by the car, I was like, oh my god, because like you see that whole scene and he talks about it, like, what's the significance of it? And he's like, but that didn't happen. And you're like, what? So then what? And then you're like, she hit the car. And I'm like, whoa, type thing. But yeah, again, like I said, it just so yeah, the middle was good, but it was like, it was the weakest of the three acts, because it felt like a bridge to this third act. You know what I mean? Because in the middle act, you had the stuff with Daisy, and whenever it's diving into, like I said, the Benjamin and Daisy relationship was great. When he goes to visit her in New York, and she comes to visit him, and and then she wants to love with Benjamin, but he doesn't want to yet, and yada yada yada, and she finds a new boyfriend, yada yada yada. That stuff was great, but when they're diving into just Benjamin in the war and Benjamin doing this, it didn't have the biggest influence and biggest part of this film. And so, but why I say it's a bridge to the first two acts is because the first act is critical and the third act is critical, because what it also provides in the first act is just showing Benjamin wanting to grow up, and Benjamin meeting Daisy, and their relationship early on, and life lessons Benjamin picked up from his mother and his father, and so the first act, and his and his adoptive father, and his mother, and Queenie, and what's his face, Daisy's grandmother. The first act is critical in just establishing themes, establishing morals, and establishing the Daisy and Benjamin relationship. and but then the third act is the other critical act, because that's dive into his what he wanted, what his end game was to end up with Daisy. But then you see the struggle, where that great contrast to the first and third act, the idea of him wanting to get older, or in this case him wanting to get younger, him and Daisy wanting to have a life together, and you see that. But what the great thing about the other contrast is, now they realize what's next. It's all downhill. And I think this is the greatest film with the roller coaster effect, where everything's going up, and it's so sudden. Again, like I said, that big scene where if we were to take this and say this was a roller coaster, that big scene that really takes it to its peak and starts heading down is when they're in the bed and they say, they talk about their relationship, and they're like, this is nice, and they say, but then they bring up the fact that this isn't gonna last, that he's gonna get younger, she's gonna get older, and then she's like, every day I have more wrinkles. And it was like, oh, because like you don't really think that way at the first couple of acts, because you're just looking forward to the moment where they're the same age. But when that time comes, and then what really wrecked me was when it really got, and you had the sequence where he's like, he's getting so young. When he's like, looks like he's 20, and those effects were great, because like Brad Pitt was in his 40s during this film, and that was crazy. And then you see, Daisy getting older, and you're like, oh, and you see the, Caroline getting older, and you're like, oh, this. So this film was just so great. It was so. It was really unique, but it really, again, touched on, because you see someone who cares about so many, because part of time is the aging aspect. But if you're with someone you love, then you're gonna age together. But what kind of made this even really, again, like I said, put that emphasis on nothing lasts, and time changes and goes, and is this idea of he's getting younger and she's getting older, and this idea of like he's gonna be a kid and a baby while she's gonna be in her 80s, and yet they still want to make the most of it, is very cool and very inspirational, very crazy. So I really enjoyed this film. I really cannot emphasize that enough. Another knockout of the park by David Fincher. Stay tuned for videos coming at you.